Il professore Glenn Diesen intervista Oleksandr Dubinsky, giornalista e membro del parlamento ucraino. Dubinsky era membro del partito politico di Zelensky, il Servitore del Popolo. È stato eletto vicepresidente della Commissione Finanze, Politica Fiscale e Doganale. Tuttavia Dubinsky è stato arrestato nel novembre 2023 per alto tradimento. L'accusa includeva attività volte a screditare la leadership politica e militare ucraina e di aver diffuso false informazioni sull'interferenza ucraina nei processi politici statunitensi. È stato anche accusato di essere implicato nel tentativo di scoprire materiale compromettente su Joe Biden. Dubinsky ha negato tutte le accuse, insistendo sul fatto che l'indagine è motivata politicamente. Dal carcere, Dubinsky ha avvertito che l'Ucraina sta cadendo in una nuova forma di dittatura.
This is my interview with Oleksandr Dubinsky, a Ukrainian journalist who became a member of parliament in Ukraine. Dubinsky was aligned with Zelensky. He was a member of Zelensky's political party, the Servant of the People, named after his TV show. And Dubinsky was elected deputy chair of the Committee on Finance, Tax and Customs Policy. However, Dubinsky was eventually arrested in November of 2023 for high treason, which included being accused of activities aimed at discrediting Ukraine's political and military leadership and spreading false information about Ukrainian interference into the US political processes. Now, Dubinsky, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, has denied all charges, insisting that the investigation is politically motivated. And from jail, Dubinsky has warned that Ukraine is falling into a new form of dictatorship, and he has called for the impeachment of Zelensky. Now, in the following interview, Dubinsky provides some very incredible insights into the inner workings of Ukraine under Zelensky's rule, as well as the larger challenges facing the country and why Zelensky is quite averse to ending the war. Now, given that Mr. Dubinsky is in prison without internet access, this interview was done by me providing the questions and then Dubinsky answering these questions on camera before putting it together at the end. So let me start first by welcoming Oleksandr Dubinsky.
Glenn, здравствуйте.
Hi, Glenn. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
So my first question is that you are a member of the Ukrainian parliament, previously aligned with Zelensky. You were part of Zelensky's political party. And recently you announced that you're running for president in Ukraine. However, you are doing this from prison as you are currently held for treason. How did you end up in this situation?
Globally, my story is a clear demonstration of how Volodymyr Zelensky changed after Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Following the new U.S. Biden's administration's course toward open confrontation with the Russian Federation, Zelensky made a 180-degree shift in both his foreign and domestic policies, abandoning his previous peace-oriented approach. Everyone who refused to support this shift was expelled from his team. Only those willing to move from peace toward war remained by his side. At this point, it is important to step away from the narrative briefly to explain why this policy reversal occurred. In Ukraine, it is widely believed that Zelensky's sharp change in course, from seeking dialogue with Russia to fueling confrontation, was a result of compromising material collected by British intelligence services, allegedly working either at the behest of or in coordination with individuals linked to the Biden campaign. The most often cited example of such compromising information is the failed military intelligence of Ukraine, GUR operation, to capture fighters from the Wagner Group, which was allegedly leaked to Russia by Zelensky and his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak. It remains unknown whether this compromise was obtained through Zelensky's inner circle or his personal communications. However, for example, in my direct conversations with Zelensky, I noticed that he used WhatsApp registered to a Baltic mobile operator, making him highly vulnerable to foreign intelligence interception, especially by British services. At the same time, another question arises. What leverage did Russia have over Zelensky to the extent that he would leak military intelligence to them? Again, these are rumors, but it is widely speculated that Zelensky had attended a number of parties in Moscow of a special nature, which were recorded by Russian intelligence. Allegedly, these parties involved non-traditional sexual behavior, including with Russian pop star Philip Kirkorov. In Ukraine, Zelensky has also long been rumored to have a personal relationship with Yermak. Again, I stress that these are rumors, but widespread and persistent ones. Another related theory suggests that Zelensky had agreed to facilitate Ukraine's rapid capitulation on February 22, 2022. That would explain why he publicly denied the impending Russian invasion, even when Russian tanks were already at the border. Additional facts support this theory. In the days leading up to the invasion, over 10,000 mines were removed from Ukraine's southern front, allowing Russian forces to break through from Crimea into Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Mykolaiv, seize Mariupol, and link up with separatist forces in Donbass. Despite global intelligence warnings about a likely airborne operation at Hostomel Airport near Kiev, elite Ukrainian units were withdrawn from the area just before the attack. In other words, this may have been Zelensky's payment to Russia in exchange for not releasing the compromising materials they allegedly had on him. It's also worth noting that for the first 2 to 3 days of the invasion, no one knew where Zelensky was. He only reappeared once it became clear that Putin's blitzkrieg had failed. My personal story is deeply intertwined with these events. I joined Zelensky's team because he promised to end the war and fight systemic corruption, including corruption linked to foreign actors, such as George Soros's networks. I defeated Ihor Kononenko, a close ally and financial manager of former President Poroshenko, in my electoral district. Investigating the corruption of Poroshenko and his circle was a core message of my 2019 campaign, and perfectly aligned with Zelensky's platform at the time. As a principled politician, I continued my investigations into Poroshenko's activities after becoming a member of parliament. My work led me to uncover collusion between Poroshenko and former ecology minister Mykola Zlochevsky. Poroshenko helped Zlochevsky retain licenses for gas extraction that were acquired for next to nothing, while the investment firm ICU, closely tied to Poroshenko and former National Bank Governor Valeria Gonchareva, facilitated money laundering and tax evasion schemes. Burisma, the company where Hunter Biden was employed, benefited directly from these operations. I independently investigated the misuse of Ukrainian government bonds in such schemes. At one point, Zelensky himself asked me to collaborate with MP Andriy Derkach on these investigations. In November 2019, Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office officially charged Zlochevsky, and I spoke about this during a press conference in the broader context of post-Maidan corruption. However, in 2020, after Biden won the U.S. election, the Burisma corruption issue suddenly became toxic for Zelensky's administration. Soros, as a prominent Biden supporter and donor, was elevated to an untouchable status in Ukraine and was given carte blanche to expand his influence over state institutions. In January 2021, based on a complaint by the NGO Anti-Corruption Action Center, which receives 80% of its funding from USAID and 20% from Soros-related foundations, I was placed under politically motivated U.S. sanctions. I view these sanctions as revenge by the Biden family and Soros for exposing their operations in Ukraine. These measures were coordinated between Zelensky's office and the U.S. Embassy and framed as a gesture of goodwill to the new administration. In reality, those sanctions are now the main justification for my current imprisonment under the absurd charge of discrediting the U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden through his connection to Burisma, discrediting the activities of Soros-backed foundations in Ukraine. Essentially, I am being punished for exposing the very misuse of USAID funds that was publicly confirmed in the Doge investigation of 2025, work that I began back in 2019. Moreover, my case is being used to fabricate a so-called Russian connection to Donald Trump's 2020 campaign, closely mirroring the false narrative created around Hunter Biden's laptop. All of this is being orchestrated by Zelensky, who continues cooperating with globalist forces in an effort to sabotage Trump's peace agenda. Why is this being done through Ukraine? Because after $34 billion in USAID assistance, the globalists now fully control Ukraine's judicial and law enforcement systems. With Zelensky's support, they can secure any court ruling they want. I believe the Trump team seriously underestimates this threat. My desire to run for the presidency of Ukraine is a direct continuation of my 2019 campaign. Unlike Zelensky, I have not changed my values. I believe that corruption, Soros's influence, and war with Russia are Ukraine's greatest problems. Since November 2024, another danger has emerged: Zelensky's attempt to preserve his personal power through perpetual war and by sabotaging President Trump's peace initiatives. Zelensky is actively trying to present himself as the figurehead of a global anti-Trump project, a narrative embraced by liberal elites and globalists. I strongly believe that Ukraine cannot survive without support from the United States, and the values and strategic vision of President Donald Trump best reflect the direction Ukraine must follow in order to recover and rebuild after a war that never should have happened.